Welcome to Kenneth Zenith Cablevision. Thank you for watching. It's time for talk. Each evening at this time, Monday through Friday, Rosemary interviews local personalities and others who bring items of interest to this community. Time for Talk is a community betterment service designed to cooperate with our local community betterment program. And now, it's time for talk.
I'm excited tonight. This is going to be a first for Time for Talk. We're at SEMO Little Theater. Actually, I think it's a first for SEMO too, because we're going to talk about earthquakes. You and I, you know, we live in probably the second most dangerous earthquake zone in this whole United States, maybe even the first. But tonight we're going to hear from a lady. Well, now you know the New Madrid earthquake happened in 1811, 1812, a lot of aftershocks. It was so strong it rang church bells in Boston, Massachusetts. In fact, it would have gone off of any seismographs had there been such a thing as seismographs. But we'll talk about that later. Tonight, we have a first-hand experience. We have a lady with us here at the theater, and she was an eyewitness to these things that happened in this whole area, and we're going to be able to chat with her. I think she'll be in shape to talk maybe still. And then I think there is a scientist coming. The high school, the kids have been invited to be here and to listen to this, and I think the teachers have even promised to give them extra credit if they come, to be earthquake savvy. And we're going to catch the events of the evening, and we'll bring you what we see. I'm interested in what they're going to be.
It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Seismo, a well-known seismologist, played by our very own Dr. T. Everett Mobley. He will introduce an eyewitness and survivor of the earthquakes, who will give us her recollections of what really went on during those amazing times 200 years ago. Please welcome Dr. Seismo.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Welcome. Most of you know that about 200 years ago, in fact exactly 200 years ago, there was an earthquake along the New Madrid Fault. It was monstrous big, and tonight we are very fortunate to have with us on the 200th anniversary a survivor of that earthquake, Miss Eliza Bryan, portrayed by Marion McDonald. So welcome, please, Eliza Bryan. Why, it's 2011.
2011? I was in that grave almost 150 years. It was cold.
You look good.
For the shape she's in.
Are we in New Madrid?
No, we're in Kennett, Missouri, about 45 miles away from New Madrid.
Y'all got shook?
Well, yes, we did.
Oh, and you're a scientist?
Why, yes, I am. I am a seismologist, a scientist who studies earth science and earthquakes.
Those shakes we had, were they really caused by the electrics?
Well, in your time, electricity wasn't well understood. People were just beginning to study it. They knew it was powerful, and so many things were attributed to the electrics. But earthquakes are not caused by electricity. We now know that they're caused by evil spirits in the earth. No, not really. I just made that up. They're caused by tectonic forces. The Earth's crust is not solid like the skin of an orange. It's composed of pieces they call tectonic plates. There are 7 huge ones and a lot of smaller ones. And they're floating on liquid rock. Even though they're 60 miles thick or more and enormous in size, they're moving as they float on the liquid rock that composes a lot of our Earth. They're moving very slowly, but they are moving. When they're moving away from one another, it's not much of a problem. Molten rock flows up from beneath, fills in the cracks, and solidifies. When they dive under and over one another, it's not quite too bad. But when they meet one another, what do you think happens when the irresistible force meets the immovable object? Not much for a while. But the pressure keeps building up, and one day it blows. Tell us, Miss Bryan, what was it like with that first big shock?
Oh my. Well, in the first place, it was the middle of the night. We couldn't see a thing. It had been a pretty starry night up to that point. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, we were shaken out of our beds. The houses were going. We thought they were going to fall on us. Nobody could find their flint, so we couldn't make a light. We just ran outdoors. We had no idea. About 2 in the morning, we were visited by a violent shock of an earthquake accompanied by a very awful noise resembling loud but distant thunder, but more hoarse and vibrating. It followed in a few minutes by the complete saturation of the atmosphere with a sulfurous vapor that caused total darkness. The screams of the terrified people, the cries of the birds and the beasts, the cracking of the trees falling, the roaring of the Mississippi formed a scene truly horrible. And it was the middle of winter, although it had been unusually warm for December.
What did you do?
Well, we found each other by the screaming, and we just stuck together and waited for morning. Someone finally went back into one of the houses and got some coals so we could at least make a light, make a fire to stay warm. We did have plenty of wood to hand. We just bundled up in our quilts and waited for daylight. And from that time until sunrise, a number of lighter shocks occurred. Then, about sunrise, a shock still more violent than the first took place, and the terror which had been excited in everyone and indeed in all animal nature was, if possible, doubled. The people fled in every direction. One woman ran till she dropped. She was the only one who died in New Madrid.
Well, I'm not sure what that lesson tells us, but you know how far away the earthquake was felt?
Well, of course, we had no idea that night because nobody could get through. We later heard, once people were back on the river again, that it woke up President Madison in Washington.
Wow.
And it rang the church bells in Boston. So we really had no idea how far it was going, what was going on anywhere else, because nobody could get through.
We heard that the Mississippi River flowed backwards for a time. Is that true? Did you see it?
Oh yeah, we certainly did. Now you have to understand there were 3 big shakes. There was the first one that was on December 16th, and there was another one almost like it on the 17th. Then there was the next major one that was on January the 23rd, and then the biggest one of all was on February 7th. And after the February 7th one is when the river ran backwards, and it did run backwards for a day or so. And there was 2 different rapids on the Mississippi River. One of them, we could hear the rapids all the way into town. You can't believe how many boats went down in those rapids. We were standing there on the shore watching, not a thing we could do. One boat had a woman and 6 children in it. We watched them drown. There was not a thing we could do. It was just awful, those poor souls.
Were the animals affected?
Oh yeah, they were mortal terrified the same as we were. Every bird of the air cried out. The sound defied description. Some of them landed on our heads and shoulders because the people looked safer than the trees that were lashing about, tangling up, falling over. Some of the trees split from the bottom up and falling into the river. I guess the people looked good by comparison. You can't imagine the noise. You just can't imagine.
I see. What about your own animals?
Well, there wasn't much we could do for them. We just turned them out and let them fend for themselves. They mostly stuck pretty close because no place else looked any better than where we were.
I see. What about aftershocks? How long did they go on?
You mean other shakes after the first big ones?
That's exactly right.
Oh, well, there were plenty of those that first night. Then there was the big shock after the sun came up, even worse than the first one. They went on almost continuously for 3 months. On January 23rd, 1812, Another shock occurred as violent as the severest of the first ones, accompanied by all the steam noises, effects on the trees, animals, land, river. From that time, January 23rd, until the 4th of February, the earth was in continual agitation, visibly waving as a gentle sea. That is what I saw. That day there was another shock, nearly as hard as the preceding ones. Next day, 4 such, and on the 7th, about 4 in the morning, a concussion took place so much more violent than any of the other ones that we call that one hard shock. The awful darkness of the atmosphere, the violence of the tempestuous thundering, together with all the other phenomena that came with the earlier ones, formed a scene. Ellie, I don't know which one of them was more scared. And then there were the folks at Little Prairie. Oh, mercy. Little Prairie, about 40 miles downriver from us. Those folks really had a time. You remember I said there was that other shake, the next shake, on December 17th, there was a big one around noon. And of course we were in touch with the folks at Little Prairie. We found out about all this later. They had gotten shook by the one on the 16th, bad.
Really, anybody who's grown up in this part of the country has experienced a few shakes from time to time. I can remember when I was a child, the chandeliers in our church swinging back and forth pretty vigorously one Sunday morning. I didn't understand why the grown-ups were so upset. I've got a better idea about that now. Some scientists, in fact, think we are overdue for a medium to large one. Personally, I just stayed home so that I could turn off the gas and loot the homes of my friends and neighbors who had left.
We just ran out of our houses because we had no idea what was going on. Is that what people still would do?
Actually, it's safer to stay inside until the shaking stops, but you need to take a little emergency precaution called drop, cover, and hold. You drop to the floor so you don't fall down. It's kind of like when you hang your clothes up on the floor so they won't fall off of the hangers. You get down so you don't fall down. You stay away from glass and heavy objects if you can. You get under something sturdy. You're covering yourself with a table or a desk, something that will protect you from falling debris. And the hold part, drop, cover, and hold. The thing's shaking, it's vibrating. Here you are like this, and the table vibrates over there. It's not helping you anymore, so you hang on to it. So you drop, you cover, you hold on. Fortunately, we have a lot of cooperation now for food and other things, and we have good roads and great transportation. Food and other goods come great distances to us, but even from other countries as well as from across our own country. But these good roads have lots of good bridges. They have lots of overpasses, things that would come down pretty easily in a big shake, and the roads would be blocked. We have a lot of forms of communication now, but most of them depend on electricity in some way or another. And if the power lines come down, that'll be the end of that, and they certainly probably will come down. Those of us who were here for the ice storm in '09, the power lines will come down.
Now, can people make their own electricity?
People do have generators, especially people who were here for the ice storm, but they require fuel. Where will the fuel come from if the roads are down? It's a problem. We could have a lot of problems. Well, I see we have some scouts in the audience tonight. What's the scout motto? Be prepared.
Good idea.
And when they asked Baden Powell, be prepared for what? He said, why, for any old thing. But in this case, we're going to be a little more specific. Be prepared to be on your own for 7 to 10 days. You need a place to stay warm, a way to stay dry. You need food. You need a water supply. If you take medicine, you need a couple of weeks' worth of medicine. You won't be able to go to the drugstore in all probability. Camping equipment would be a good help. Today, water is piped directly into our houses, and the used water is piped directly out of the houses. So most people are ill-prepared to find their own water, much less purify it and make it drinkable. But the shake, those pipes very likely will break, and you won't be able to flush the toilet and have it go anywhere. You won't be able to turn on the faucet and get any water. So people need to figure out a way to supply themselves with water for 7 to 10 days and a way to purify it if they find water after that. In your time, most people had their own garden. They canned their own foods. Maybe they milked their own cow. At least they know how to plant food and harvest it and take care of themselves, cut their own firewood. Most people today know how to do their own one job, and they depend on other people to do all those other things. When those connections are broken, they'll be in a heck of a shape.
Eliza Bryant is in no hurry to return to the grave if anybody would like to stay and speak with her. And if not, we thank you for coming. Don't forget to pick up your earthquake guide on the way out and be prepared.
Welcome to Guidelines for Life, a local origination television production made in the studios of the Slicer Street Church right here in Kennett, Missouri. The people of the Slicer Street Church want you to know that following God's rules in life will bring happiness. And now, Guidelines for Life.
We as God's people can make God visible to the people around us. Not only is it possible, but it's imperative. If we're going to be Christians and we're going to do anything to be salt and light and reach people, we've got to make God visible to the world around us. After all, God has no presence. He has no physical presence. He's an invisible God, and no one can see God and live. So we're left. He's left with us. If he's going to have a visible presence, it's got to be with us. That's our task. I'm Spencer Furby with the Slicer Street Church of Christ here in Kennett. Now, welcome you to this time and hope that you have a few moments to spend with us as we're in 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 12. We started this discussion yesterday, and what we're going to find is God made himself present and visible. I shouldn't say present. Made himself visible in Jesus as Jesus lived on earth, as described in the Gospels. But he's also made himself visible in us. And quite frankly, that sounds strange, I know, and I'm not saying we are God. It's far from that. But how does our loving each other, how does us loving each other make God visible? First, we discussed God is love. That is who God is. It's not love is God. It's God defines love. Whatever God is, that's what love means. And so God, everything he does flows out of his love, him being love, and is generated by his love for people. And so, if we are of God and God is love, then we are loving people. And we'll love each other, especially. Second, God demonstrated his own love for us. And this, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That's Romans chapter 5. But in this passage, he goes on to say in 1 John chapter 4, 7, this is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is the definition of love. Here it is. Not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. If you want to know what love is, ultimately it's this. It's Jesus came to die on the cross to atone for our sins. Whatever